The silence stretched across the Family Feud studio like a heavy blanket, broken only by the quiet sound of 17-year-old Jake Mitchell's shallow breathing as he stared at the floor, his hands shoved deep in his hoodie pockets. When Steve Harvey had asked the survey question, "Name something that makes life worth living," Jake had felt the familiar weight settle on his chest, the darkness that had been his constant companion for the past 6 months, whispering that maybe, just maybe, there wasn't an answer to that question. "I don't know," Jake finally whispered into his microphone, his voice barely audible above the studio's ambient noise. Maybe nothing is worth it." The words hung in the air, like a confession, and in that moment, everyone in the studio, from Steve Harvey to the camera operators to the 300 audience members, understood that they weren't witnessing typical game show nerves. They were witnessing a young man's cry for help, broadcast live to millions of homes across America. Steve Harvey felt his heart stop for just a moment. In 40 years of television, he had encountered every type of contestant imaginable, but there was something about Jake's hollow tone, the way he seemed to be disappearing even while standing under bright lights, that sent alarm bells through every part of Steve's being. This wasn't about entertainment anymore. This was about a life hanging in the balance. Beside Jake stood his mother, Linda Mitchell, 42 years old, and carrying the exhausted weight of someone who had been fighting to save her child for months. Her hands were clenched tightly together, not from nervousness about being on television, but from the desperate hope that somehow, some way, this experience might reach her son when nothing else had been able to. Let me take you back to how we got here. Jake Mitchell had once been the kind of teenager that parents brag about to their friends. Honor roll student, varsity soccer player, class president, the young man who helped elderly neighbors with their groceries and volunteered at the local animal shelter on weekends. He had plans for college, dreams of becoming a veterinarian, and a girlfriend named Sarah, who made him laugh until his sides ached. But mental illness doesn't discriminate based on achievement or potential. The depression had crept in slowly, like fog rolling in from the ocean. Subtle at first, but gradually obscuring everything that had once brought Jake joy. It started during his junior year of high school, with feelings of exhaustion that sleep couldn't cure, a growing sense that nothing he did mattered, and an increasing inability to connect with the activities and people he had once loved. The first sign Linda had noticed was when Jake quit the soccer team. "I'm just not feeling it anymore," he had told her, shrugging, when she pressed for more details. Then came the breakup with Sarah, Jake's explanation being that he didn't want to drag her down. His grades began to slip, not dramatically at first, but enough that teachers started expressing concern. He stopped hanging out with friends, stopped talking at dinner, stopped engaging with the world in any meaningful way. Linda had tried everything she could think of. She scheduled appointments with their family doctor, who referred them to a therapist. She researched depression and anxiety, read books about helping teenagers, reached out to school counselors, and even convinced Jake to try medication when therapy alone wasn't enough. Some days were better than others, but the overall trajectory seemed to be downward, Jake retreating further into himself with each passing week. The turning point had come 3 months ago, when Linda found a note in Jake's backpack while doing laundry. It wasn't a suicide note exactly, but it was close. Pages of writing, about feeling worthless, about being a burden to everyone around him, about wondering if the world would be better without him. The words had been like physical blows, each sentence confirming Linda's worst fears about what was happening inside her son's mind. The crisis intervention that followed had involved emergency therapy sessions, a brief hospitalization for psychiatric evaluation, medication adjustments, and a safety plan that included removing potential means of self-harm from their home. Jake had cooperated with treatment, but in the mechanical way of someone going through the motions rather than someone who believed recovery was possible. For months, Linda had watched her vibrant, talented son become a shadow of himself. She had seen him fake smiles for therapists and teachers, participate in family dinners without really being present, and complete homework assignments with the same enthusiasm he might show for cleaning a bathroom. The spark that had made Jake himself seemed to be dying a little more each day. The Family Feud opportunity had come through Jake's therapist, Dr. Sarah Chen, who believed that positive, novel experiences might help break through Jake's isolation and depression. The show was featuring Mental Health Awareness Week, highlighting families who were navigating mental health challenges and celebrating the importance of support, treatment, and hope. Sometimes, Dr. Chen had explained to Linda, being in a completely different environment, surrounded by energy and support, can create moments of connection that therapy rooms can't replicate. It might help Jake remember that there are people rooting for him, that he matters to more than just his immediate family. Linda had been hesitant at first. Jake barely left his room, except for school and therapy appointments. The idea of him appearing on national television seemed overwhelming and potentially harmful, but Jake had surprised her by agreeing to participate. Though his motivation seemed less about excitement and more about resignation, another thing to get through, another obligation to fulfill. During the drive from their home in Denver to the Atlanta studios, Jake had been mostly silent, staring out the window at the passing landscape with the same blank expression he wore at home. Linda had tried to start conversations about the show, about meeting Steve Harvey, about the possibility of winning money, but Jake's responses had been minimal. Yeah, okay, sure, monosyllables that indicated he was listening, but not really engaging. Jake, Linda had said at one point, I know this feels like a lot right now. I know everything feels hard, but I want you to know that I'm proud of you for doing this, for trying something new. Jake had nodded without looking at her. I know, Mom, I'm trying. Those 3 words, I'm trying, had broken Linda's heart because she could hear both the effort and the exhaustion in them. Her son was trying, but it was the kind of trying that felt like running uphill in sand, expending enormous energy to make minimal progress. The Family Feud studios had been overwhelming for Jake in ways that Linda hadn't anticipated. The bright lights, the loud music, the crowds of people, the cameras, everything about the environment was stimulating and energetic. The complete opposite of the quiet, controlled spaces where Jake felt safest. Linda had watched him shrink into his hoodie, his discomfort visible despite his attempts to cooperate with the pre-show preparations. During the family introductions, Jake had struggled to present himself with any enthusiasm. I'm Jake Mitchell, he had said flatly. I'm 17, and I'm from Denver. Steve had immediately picked up on Jake's low energy and had approached with extra sensitivity. Jake, my man, how you feeling today? You excited to be here? I guess, Jake had replied, which was about as enthusiastic as he got about anything these days. Steve had looked at Linda, who had given him a meaningful look that conveyed what she couldn't say on camera, that they were here because they were fighting for Jake's life, and that this appearance represented hope when other interventions hadn't been enough. Well, Jake, Steve had said gently, we're glad to have you here. Sometimes good things happen when you step outside your comfort zone. The game had progressed slowly, with Linda carrying most of the family's participation while Jake answered, when directly asked, but without any of the competitive spirit or enthusiasm that Family Feud typically generated. The Mitchell family was playing against the Rodriguez family from Texas, and both teams seemed to understand that this was less about competition and more about creating a supportive environment. During the second round, when Steve asked for things that make people smile, Jake had buzzed in with dogs, earning a spot on the board and a high five from Steve. For just a moment, Linda had seen a flicker of something positive cross Jake's face, not quite pride, but perhaps a brief remembrance of what it felt like to contribute something valuable. Good answer, Jake, Steve had said enthusiastically. You like dogs? Yeah, Jake had replied. I used to volunteer at the animal shelter. I kind of miss it. It was the most personal thing Jake had shared all day, and Linda had felt a surge of hope. Maybe Dr. Chen had been right about new environments, creating opportunities for connection. But it was during the 4th round that the moment arrived that would change everything. Steve had announced the survey question with his usual energy, not knowing that he was about to ask something that would cut to the core of Jake's daily struggle. Name something that makes life worth living. The question hung in the studio air, seemingly straightforward but carrying devastating weight for someone who had been wrestling with that exact question for months. For most contestants, it would generate easy answers: family, friends, love, success, happiness. But for Jake, standing on that stage in front of millions of viewers, the question forced him to confront the fundamental doubt that had been consuming him. Linda had started to step forward to answer for the family, but something made her pause. Maybe it was therapist training kicking in, or maybe it was maternal instinct, but she sensed that this was Jake's question to answer, even if his response might be painful to hear. Jake stood frozen at the podium, the microphone in front of him, waiting for an answer he wasn't sure he could give honestly. The seconds stretched into what felt like minutes, the studio audience growing restless with the unexpected pause. Finally, Jake leaned into the microphone, his voice barely above a whisper, but clear enough for everyone to hear. "I don't know. Maybe nothing is worth it." The studio fell completely silent. Not the expectant quiet of an audience waiting for a game show answer, but the profound silence of 300 people recognizing that they had just witnessed someone's deepest struggle being voiced on live television. Steve Harvey slowly set down his index cards. In that moment, every instinct he had developed as an entertainer told him to lighten the mood, make a joke, redirect to safer ground, but something deeper, his humanity, his own experience with struggle, his understanding that this young man needed help more than the show needed ratings, made him choose a different path. "Hold up," Steve said, his voice carrying across the studio with quiet authority. "Stop the music, stop the game, stop everything." He walked away from his podium and approached Jake directly, his movements careful and purposeful. As he got closer, he could see that Jake's eyes were filled with tears that he was fighting not to shed in front of so many people. "Jake," Steve said gently, "can you look at me for a moment?" Jake raised his eyes slowly, expecting to see judgment or pity, but finding instead something he hadn't experienced in months. Genuine care from someone who barely knew him. "Jake, I need to tell you something, and I need everyone in this studio and everyone watching at home to hear this too." Steve continued, his voice carrying the weight of absolute sincerity. "You matter. Your life has value. You are worth every breath you take, every sunrise you see, every moment you spend on this earth." Jake's composure crumbled completely. "But I don't feel like I matter," he said through tears. "I feel like I'm just taking up space, like everyone would be better off without me." Steve moved closer, understanding instinctively that Jake needed to feel protected rather than exposed in this vulnerable moment. "Son, that voice in your head, that's telling you that that's not your voice. That's depression lying to you. And depression is a lie. It tells you things that aren't true, makes you forget who you really are." He turned to address the studio audience and cameras. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a young man here who is fighting a battle that millions of people fight every day. Mental illness is real. Depression is real. And the pain that Jake is feeling right now is real. But so is hope. So is help. So is the love that surrounds him." Steve looked directly at Linda, who was crying openly. "Mrs. Mitchell, tell your son what he means to you." Linda stepped forward, her voice strong despite her tears. "Jake, you are not taking up space. You are the reason I get up in the morning. You are the reason I believe in goodness, in possibility, in love. The world needs your kindness, your intelligence, your heart. I need you, not some perfect version of you. I need exactly who you are right now, even in your pain." But Steve wasn't finished with this moment that had transcended entertainment and become intervention. He turned back to the audience. "I want everyone in this studio to stand up," Steve announced. "I want you to show Jake what it looks like when an entire room of people cares about someone they just met." The audience rose as one, not with the manufactured enthusiasm of a game show crowd, but with the genuine emotion of people who recognized a human being in crisis and wanted to help. As they stood, many began to speak. "You matter, Jake. We're here for you. You're not alone. Your life is valuable." The voices grew louder, creating a chorus of support that filled the studio with something Jake hadn't experienced in months. The feeling of being valued, wanted, supported by a community of strangers who cared about his well-being simply because he was a human being worthy of care. Jake looked around the studio in amazement, tears streaming down his face, but for the first time in months, they weren't tears of despair. They were tears of recognition. Recognition that he wasn't as alone as he had believed, that his pain was seen and acknowledged, and that there were people willing to fight for his life, even when he couldn't fight for it himself. Steve Harvey then did something that would become one of the most meaningful moments in television history. He removed his suit jacket, his lucky jacket that he wore to every taping, and placed it around Jake's shoulders. "Jake," Steve said, his voice thick with emotion, "this jacket has been with me through every show I've hosted, through good times and challenging times. But today, it belongs with someone who needs to know that he's surrounded by protection, by love, and by people who believe in his worth." Jake pulled the jacket closer around himself, and, for the first time in months, he felt something other than numbness or pain. He felt hope. "Mr. Steve," Jake said, his voice stronger than it had been all day, "thank you for stopping the show. Thank you for seeing me." "Son," Steve replied, "the show will always be here. But right now, you needed to know that you're not invisible, that your pain matters, and that your life matters more than any game we could play." Steve turned to address the cameras. One final time, if there's anyone watching at home who feels like Jake feels, who thinks that maybe life isn't worth living, I want you to know that help is available. Call the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. Talk to someone. Reach out. You matter too. What happened after the cameras stopped rolling became a model for crisis intervention and mental health advocacy. The show's production team immediately connected Jake and Linda with additional mental health resources, and Steve Harvey's foundation established a scholarship program for mental health awareness and suicide prevention. The episode, when it aired with appropriate content warnings and resource information, became one of the most watched and shared in Family Feud history. But more importantly, it sparked a national conversation about teenage mental health, the importance of community support, and the power of being seen and valued during times of crisis. The response was overwhelming. The show received over 50,000 messages from viewers sharing their own struggles with mental health and thanking Jake for his courage in being vulnerable on national television. Mental health organizations reported increased calls to crisis lines and increased enrollment in therapy programs. Jake's journey didn't magically become easy after that day, but something fundamental had shifted. He had experienced community care, unconditional support, and most importantly, he had felt his own worth reflected in the reactions of strangers who cared about his survival, simply because he existed. With continued therapy, medication management, and the support of his community, Jake began the slow work of recovery. He returned to volunteering at the animal shelter, found new ways to connect with friends, and started speaking at local mental health awareness events, sharing his story to help other teenagers understand that depression is treatable and that asking for help is a sign of strength, not weakness. The jacket that Steve gave Jake became a symbol of hope and protection. Jake wore it to therapy appointments, on difficult days, to school events when he needed to feel brave, and to speaking engagements where he shared his story with other young people struggling with mental health challenges. Linda often says that the Family Feud appearance didn't cure Jake's depression, but it reminded both of them that healing happens in community, that support can come from unexpected places, and that sometimes the most important thing someone can do is simply witness your pain and remind you of your worth. Steve Harvey learned that day that the most powerful moments in television happen when you're willing to abandon the script and respond to human need. Sometimes a game show host can do more than entertain. Sometimes he can help save a life by creating space for someone to be seen, valued, and supported in their darkest moment. The lesson that Jake Mitchell taught that day extends far beyond mental health or television. He reminded the world that every person carries invisible struggles, that community support can be life-saving, and that sometimes the most important thing you can tell someone is simply, you matter, your life has value, you are not alone. Because that's what hope looks like. That's what community sounds like. And that's what happens when a young man's cry for help meets a room full of people willing to remind him that his life is worth living. Proving that sometimes the most important victories happen not when you win games, but when you choose to keep living, despite the pain.